Okay, welcome everyone to this week's compiler architecture meeting. We have one topic today. Eric Choi is going to be talking about switching inliners from the command line. So I'll turn it over to him to begin the discussion. Eric?
Hi. So first of all, my name's Eric, and I've been working with Andrew on an inlining strategy for OpenJ9. And we are trying to contribute this inlining strategy to the project, and as such, certain changes are required in OMR and OpenJ9. Since we're just starting the open sourcing project, one of the very first issues that we are encountering is how exactly are we going to contribute this inlining strategy such that we preserve the default inlining strategies at the moment, and via a command line argument, we can switch to the new inlining strategies whenever we want. Now, I did not prepare a presentation, but on the issue that is linked on the agenda, there are three small proposals on how we think this could be used, or sorry, how can we achieve changing the inlining strategy on the command line. The first one is just placing a conditional statement on the ops array at the optimizer file on the optimizer class, and just replacing our inliner with the default inliner path. The second option is to have a wrapper class around the around a specific instance of the of the default inlining strategy, and when that sorry, what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say is that we would like to have this class, which is named tr select inliner, to select either the default inlining class or the new experimental inlining class based on the based on a command line argument, or either we could move the multiplexing of the inlining classes to the optimization itself. So that would be option 3. So in option 3, we would have the optimization kind of decide which inlining path to perform depending on things such as hotness or command line flags, etc. And this will enable further experimentation with the inliner, because then we would be able to just switch the inlining strategy at will, and that could be beneficial. That is beneficial for us. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to note that for those not familiar with the optimization enums that we have in OMR, there are 3 entries for inlining at the moment. There's a inlining, there's a targeted inlining, and there's a trivial inlining. And those 3 are currently used in the static optimization strategies specifically to denote a specific kind of inlining that we want to have happen in the optimization strategy at that point. So in OMR at the moment, there's one that's initialized in OMR at the moment, which is the trivial inlining, and is in the default set of optimization levels that are provided by OMR. OpenJ9 initializes all 3. It uses the trivial inlining in the cold level strategy. It uses the inlining as the standard default inliner at warm and above, and there is an additional targeted inlining, which is about mopping up some calls. So an inliner may not choose to inline or even explore the entire state space of possible inlinings, and there are times where you, in a language implementation, want to ensure certain calls are always inlined, and the targeted inlining is intended to do that. So it represents a kind of cleanup calls pass, as opposed to try and pick the best things to inline for my body. It's sort of a, and there's this follow-on set of things where the call overhead is really high, or maybe it's not even representable and you want to force the inlining for whatever reason. It's kind of the mop-up pass that runs at the end. So that's the current state of affairs as far as the opt enums are concerned. And currently, those slots are initialized to a fixed optimization, and that is the optimization that will run in that slot for the duration of the compiler being instantiated. So, yeah, that's just kind of the state of affairs.
Yes.
Was there anything else you wanted to add on the design, Eric, just before we start debate?
I just kind of wanted to ask for input on how to implement this, since it's going to go to OMR, I'm assuming. I don't like the design that I think is the preserves some of the properties that you guys are interested in, and by that properties I mean make sure that the enums still are meaningful. How can I say this? So I don't want to replace every single enum with my new optimization pass enum because they represent different things. And that is one kind of property that I think is worth preserving. By that, I think that the best option in the issue is option number 2, in which we still preserve the enums that are currently being used as to denote the optimizations themselves, and then we just have a wrapper class and that is able to instantiate the default inliner for that specific enum, but on the condition that if there is a command line argument, then we switch to our experimental inliner, for example. So I think that is probably the best option available from the 3 that I presented on the issue, but if you guys have any more ideas, I am all ears.
Sorry, I'm not sure I quite followed that. With that second option, why do we need the select inliner?
So I think the gist of this is that a project will have some default inliner that they expect to have initialized in an optimization slot.
Yeah.
And Eric's research, and certainly the development of inliners in general for OMR and languages that derive from that, may necessitate that you have a non-default inliner that you are in the process of developing, right? Getting an inliner tuned to work for a language in general is a large undertaking.
Yep.
You generally would like that inliner to live in your language implementation's code base, or in OMR if it is an OMR inliner. And you would like to be able to switch to use that inliner usually on a sort of per method or per hotness kind of basis for experimentation.
Okay. Okay, so then the idea is, you like, for example, in J9, you would have those you currently have 3 inliners.
Yes.
And this would let you replace one of those inliners with an experimental one.
Well, one or more of them.
One or more
of them, right?
Yeah.
And command line options can be used to specify which one you wish to replace and that kind of thing.
Okay, I see. All right.
Do you already have an implementation of select inliner?
I have an implementation for select inliner, but I have it for the third option, which is we just create an inlining pass that replaces all other inlining passes. Sorry, let me rephrase that. That replaces the trivial inlining and the inlining passes, but does not replace the targeted inlining pass. And so the code is also on the, or like a smaller version of the code is available on the issue based on a command line flag or the method hotness. we can multiplex between the inliners that we are deciding.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the reason I asked about the second option was because I'm wondering if you had written some code, how general that code is, because you could maybe think that this kind of a selector would be useful for other optimizations potentially as well. You could provide alternate implementations for some of these other things for some other language front ends. So I'm just wondering if we went with a second option, if we could try to make that as general as possible so that it could potentially be used in other places as well.
Yeah.
If that even makes sense.
Well, I think it looks possible. I haven't tried it, but yeah, I think we can just, instead of having a select inliner class, we can name it a little bit more generic, like I don't know, default or experiment or something. Maybe that's not a good name, but yeah, I think certainly something generic is possible.
Something more like opt choice or something like that.
Yeah.
Would be. Right.
Opt selector, multiplexer.
So yeah, so I from the point of view of the options, I'm ideologically opposed to number 3, where he's basically merging the different inliners together, and he's choosing based on hotness and stuff in the one opt strategy, because it loses the preservation of the properties of sort of the static initialization of the opt strategies and the fixed nature of the opt strategies that has been one of the only sources of sanity in the sequence of events that happens in the optimizer in most cases. And having that continue to be static, I think, is important, because if you can't even tell what optimization is running, let alone anything else, I'm not so keen on sort of that merging. I did have a question for the more OMR architecture savvy ones in the room, because like I spend most of my time in OpenJ9, so I have less exposure to the cross-language component. In proposal 2, the selector is being proposed at the level of the create here, like so he's templating the create. I was not sure if that actually needed to move out to the optimization manager, because I was not sure if the shared mutable state that's persisted across opts may need to be the thing, like if you have a custom opt manager that is associated with your opt pass, or you are doing specific things with the opt manager, or say, let's say you have let's take the case of a general opt select, right? You may want to replace, I don't know, local value propagation with a different local value propagation, but only after block extension has run, for example, right? Like there might be a condition or some, you may only want to do the replacement selectively for the purposes of testing your implementation. If it's possible that the 2 optimizations might be needed within the one run of the compiler, right? Possibly at different points in the opt strategy or whatever. Right. Would we have a problem if the optimization manager is not specialized for the optimization, right? I wasn't sure about that, so that was something I wanted to
the optimization changes under its feet.
Yeah, exactly. Because like the shared mutable state would be set up by one, it wouldn't be what the other one is expecting. I could see that you could have problems, right? Like escape analysis in OpenJ9 is like, it's not one that you are all familiar with, but one of the things that it does is it's sort of a self-enabling pass, because it's finding an opportunity and exploiting it may expose other opportunities, right? So it runs iteratively. Right. But when it does that, the am I done yet is a decrementing counter in the shared mutable state, along with some other bits and pieces that are kept in there. I'm not currently, that optimization does not clean up that shared mutable state. It resets certain parts of it, but certainly not everything. And if you were to have a different escape analysis that was possibly sharing that optimization manager, I could see that potentially being a problem. So I wasn't sure from an architecture point of view what your perspective might be.
I believe with the existing projects, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, and we deal with it when we get there, kind of thing. Or
I'm not sure. Right now, in the state of things, I don't believe any optimization it would cause problems with any of the optimizations I know of.
Mm-hmm.
I will not guarantee that's true in the future.
Yeah,
I could very easily see just someone adding an optimization that all of a sudden breaks. But
I don't know if we have to think about some way of potentially invalidating all this state that it, like if we actually switch the optimization under the optimization manager, we have to somehow invalidate the state.
I certainly think that there's a little urgency in trying to come up with at least a solution that will work in the short term, because due to various constraints, Eric wasn't able to develop his inliner completely in the open with the OpenJ9 project. He started his collaboration with IBM before OpenJ9 existed, so there was some work being done before OpenJ9 was open sourced, and so not everything was available to put out there as it was being developed. But he's certainly shown some interesting performance results and some interesting properties with his inliner that are being discussed in other venues. And I would hate for something like this to hinder a contribution of an experimental optimization or something like that.
Well, I mean, what is being proposed here certainly isn't, shouldn't really be a blocker to.
No.
There are enough options here anyway that you easily choose any one of them.
Yeah.
I don't like the third one, just from just how it just appears to be architected that way. I think the second one looks the cleanest. Kind of would like to see what the selector inliner code would look like, but
yeah, I think I can like develop it and present it next week, and like I can put up some slides and we can discuss it, or if it's needed, we can even discuss it earlier through the Slack channel or something.
Well, if you just have code, just make a pull request and we can look at the code.
Okay.
Yeah, I create a first implementation and create a pull request, and with these meetings being alternate week meetings, I think it's best that we collaborate on the pull request, and if it needs a broader sort of discussion at the end of it, then we can put it back on the agenda for next time.
Yeah, that sounds good.
The first one.
The first one I have a concern with, because we only initialized that optimization array once. Right?
So if you tried to subset it, that wouldn't work.
Yeah, like if you only want to run it on certain methods or whatever, that would rule it out at that point, because we do one init. So I think 1 is out because of that. I think 3 is out because of the way that it meshes with the current design. So you're kind of left with something like 2, kind of regardless.
Okay.
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's I don't know, it for me. I can start coding, but I don't know if we can. If anyone has anything else to say, I'll be here until the end of the meeting. Yeah.
This is the only. You're going to be here for a very short period of time, I think. All right. Any other discussion on this? No. Okay. All right. All right. Thanks, Eric. We look forward to the pull request then.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just put a note on the issue saying that the architecture meeting was inclined towards option 2, and Eric is going to make a pull request for further discussion.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I guess that's all we had for today.
Okay.
So we got in 2 weeks then. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.